Before we start, in case it's not already obvious, I'm testing out using an actual microphone this week. From initial tests, it seems to provide much higher audio quality than my default laptop mic did. Hope you agree. Slowly but surely I'm aiming to increase the overall video quality. Now, onto the video itself. In both anime and other media, a heroic sacrifice is a good bet to elicit an emotional response from the audience. It just triggers something in our collective consciousnesses, I think, especially among men, to see someone, even fictional, sacrifice themselves for others as they hold off a much larger and more powerful enemy force. And, unsurprisingly, we see this often, though not exclusively, in military-related stories, for obvious reasons. Movies like Fury, or anime like Attack on Titan are obvious examples. And, of course, there is also such a scene in what we're going to focus on today, namely, Und Panzer Der Film. I figured it was time to focus on an aspect of this perfect movie, specifically one of its probably more well-known scenes, where the Pravda girls sacrifice themselves for Katyusha during the big match. I'll pause here to provide the usual spoiler warning for Und Panzer, including their film. I did consider sourcing some clips from other shows that feature heroic sacrifices, but those scenes are by their nature spoilery, and I'd rather need to make only one spoiler warning per video. While watching these types of scenes, whether based on a true story or not, it's very easy for the viewer to get invested in the moment, since the stakes are very high. Characters are likely to die, after all. So how then did Und Panzer Der Film manage to pull off one of the best heroic sacrifices you'll ever see, despite us knowing that the girls are not even at risk of injury, let alone death? As always, it comes down to the execution. Just like the overall premise of Und Panzer itself, on its face, this scene is rather silly, since, as I just mentioned, the stakes are really not that high. Yes, the school will be closed if they lose, but when you compare it to the stakes in an actual war film, or really any other sort of dramatic action movie or show, there's not really a whole lot on the line. And again, we need to know that nobody is going to die. So, just like when the first season of the show just completely embraced the premise and ran with it, here in their film they commit 100% to the bit and treat the scene completely seriously, trusting us, the audience, to both get the joke and still feel the emotional impact of the moment. But let's back up a bit before diving into the scene itself to set the context. It's still early in the Ori Alliance versus the All-Stars University Annihilation match, and the early game is going decisively to the college girls. They've got our heroines outpositioned, and, largely thanks to the Carl Garat, which neither we nor the Ori Alliance girls have seen yet, they have them also massively outgunned. Between that bombardment and an attack with their tanks, they force one of Ori's units to abandon the strategic high ground, and that group is now in full retreat, trying to regroup with the others. Also, at this point, a heavy rainstorm blows in, which both serves to set the mood for the upcoming scene, and to also justify the insane amount of tank drifting we'll see later on the solid surfaces of the amusement park. It's amid this chaotic retreat that the scene in question takes place. Katyusha and the rest of the Pravda tanks are in the rear guard, and the pursuing Pershings are particularly targeting Katyusha's tank. That's when first Clara and the other two Pravda tank crews decide to sacrifice themselves to hold off the enemy and give Katyusha, their commander, a chance to escape. The first thing this scene really gets right is the music. All of the music in Und Panzer is great. Composer Shiro Hamaguchi is a master of his craft. But this piece of music is unique to this scene, and it really has a dramatic, emotional tone that you don't really see elsewhere in the show. It truly puts you in the moment of the heroic sacrifice, and it would fit perfectly well in a war movie about tanks. I can't play much of it here since music is more dangerous from a copyright perspective than video clips, but you really should give it a listen, ideally along with the scene itself. I'll link down below to the music track so you can give it a listen. So now that we've got the dramatic backdrop, a desperate situation, a dark, raining environment outside, and dramatic emotional music, we have the big moment. It's particularly cool how, even as this dramatic moment plays out, the writers don't forget about the dynamic between Katyusha and her subordinates. Clara and Nona are still kind of trolling Katyusha a bit regarding whether Clara speaks Japanese, with Katyusha snapping back at them in her usual manner. Still completely in character. But it also shows just how much Katyusha cares about and relies upon her teammates, despite her bluster. This brings us right to the last piece of what makes this scene work so well. They play it completely straight. All of the dialogue here would fit perfectly if there was an actual risk of death in this scene. In fact, if you show this scene to someone who doesn't know anything about Und Panzer, they'll likely think that this is a serious sacrifice moment. Just go search the scene on YouTube, and you'll see comments asking if Clara survived. There's nothing in the dialogue to break that illusion, no little smirk or wink to the viewers. Nothing is done that could deflate the tension and ruin this scene. Marvel movies, I'm looking at you. There's a time and a place for levity and releasing a bit of tension, but not during scenes like this, where you want the viewer to have an emotional response. Also, if you want an in-universe explanation as to why they're playing this so straight, it could just be that the girls are LARPing a bit, treating this like a real battle even though it's not, or they have just gotten so into the moment that they temporarily forgot it's only a sport. For them, at this moment in time, it's as real as it gets. Remember, while the stakes are relatively low compared to other stories we might read about or watch, this is a big deal for our characters here. Serious enough that everyone set aside their egos and preferred tactics to unite and help their friends in Ori save their school. And things have started off really badly, so every lost tank is keenly felt. Also, returning focus to Katyusha herself, despite the way she kind of lords over her subordinates and presents herself, she very much cares about and relies on her teammates, especially Clara and Nona. Even though they'll be okay, she will be lacking their steady presence alongside her for the rest of the match, and that hits her hard, along with seeing them willingly sacrifice themselves for her, demonstrating just how much they truly admire and care about her, despite how she might treat them sometimes. I don't think she's acting here. When she's worried about having to fight the rest of the match without her most trusted teammates, she really means it. So this isn't just a scene for the sake of a scene, or for the writers to show us that they could write a dramatic moment. As is always the case in Girls und Panzer, there is much more to it, even if it's subtle. As I've said before, and definitely will again, this is a show primarily about friendship and cooperation, and camaraderie slots in there as well. If there was ever a doubt that the members of Pravda's squad are just as much comrades in arms as any other team, this proves that they are. It's a big challenge for a commander who has a close bond with his or her soldiers to let them sacrifice themselves for the good of the unit or their country. Girls und Panzer might not be a show about an actual military, but the creators have made it very clear to us that they have a very good understanding of those matters, and it shows in their writing here. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is unironically one of the best heroic sacrifices you'll see in any movie or anime, even though no one dies and you know from the start that no one will die. It just goes to show you what good writing and direction will do when it comes to getting an emotional response out of the viewer. This is so well done that it really hits harder than serious sacrifice scenes. If you didn't feel anything while watching this scene for the first time, well, I don't know what to tell you. Something might be wrong there. I know I've said this about Girls und Panzer as a whole, but Der Film really is a perfect movie, and I can't recommend it enough. After watching the first season, of course. There's a whole ton to talk about just regarding Der Film, so expect much more of that in the future. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel, links to my books and light novels are in the description below. Additionally, check out my Patreon. Among other rewards, such as early looks at new updates from my mecha serial, my light novels, and more, you'll get to see future videos early. And, of course, if you have any thoughts on this video, or aspects of the show you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them, and I do my best to read and respond to all of the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.